Hello, everybody. We had this wonderful lady to our conference, The Great Resist, in Swindon just over a week ago, and I couldn't wait to get her on the programme for you all to listen. Catherine McBean, People's Food and Farming Alliance. I got it round the right way because I often get the two F's round the wrong way. How wonderful to see you. Tell us all about how, first of all, you got involved in this and what the People's Food and Farming Alliance actually does.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me, Liz. For me, this journey started over 20 years ago. When I was working I was working in the recruitment sector, but I had a number of grocery clients, and I was privy to a number of visits from the main supermarkets to conduct audits and initial conversations. And I didn't like where I was seeing things going. I didn't like the monopolization effect that I watched over the next couple of years. So I went off and investigated further and spent a number of years working in agriculture in various roles to see if my concerns were genuine. And sadly, they were. So for me, I started thinking a long time ago about what we'd need to do to shift and change it and bring the power back to the people to have that more greater control and say over food production in the UK. Plus, what would farmers need to do to be able to break away from just dealing with the middlemen, and be able to start dealing more directly with the public, having that reconnection with their local communities, and making sure that they had far greater control over what they were producing, how they were producing it, and where they could buy from and who could they could sell to. So for me, along with everything that we see happening at the moment, the answers are quite simple, and they predominantly come back to decentralization, whether that be food, health, education, economics, and so forth. So the decentralization model is everything I've built is sort of surrounded that, whether it's PHA or PFFA or the other initiatives I'm involved with. So for PFFA, we decided to start putting out there our ideas and our thoughts, and we centralized around three main areas, which is the grow your own community, the community growing groups, and then farmers and producers. And we launched in September 22 and focused very heavily initially on grow your own and community growing groups. And that went great guns. We encouraged through education and blogs and workshops and experts coming on, supporting people in growing their own and forming community growing groups, what that looks like, what the different models, how do you go about it. So built all of these resources on our website, and that went great guns. And then I was able to sort of properly come back in the room in January of this year, having put a lot of focus on the PHA and wanted to focus more on farmers and producers. And it coincided with the European farmers starting to stand up and express their concerns. And so what we do is very much work with partners and affiliates and other groups across the UK to highlight what they're doing. For example, partnership with the Open Food Network, who have a fantastic open source system. And what they do is it's worldwide, but certainly for the UK, there's a map and you can identify all the different farmers, producers, farm shops, food hubs, so on and so forth that are in your local area and can go and find what works for you. And what we're doing is also working with the Open Food Network to support the growth of more food hubs across the UK. And they've got fantastic resources to support groups in doing this. We also have some on our website, but we're not precious at all. The days of competition, the days of fighting against each other are long gone. This is far more about collaboration and supporting each other. And we're just about to launch a new partner in the coming weeks called the Sustainable Directory, which is almost another missing link, which will also connect up with the Open Food Network. And that's what this is about. It is about supporting each other and finding the different solutions and working alongside each other, not working against each other, which is historically the models we've been led to believe is how this should work. And it's absolutely not the way. We're moving into a new paradigm, and this will look far different from what we're used to, but it'll be a much kinder, fairer, more equal world, I think, as a result of that. So, what we're also doing is sort of alerting the public. There's a lot of people out there who immediately want farmers to go organic. They immediately want farmers to have a more traditional mixed farming approach. And whilst we do lean into more natural farming, and certainly we enjoy the mixed farming, traditional mixed farming models, we also need to let everyone know and support farmers through a transition. It's not going to happen overnight, but let's start moving in that direction. So, what we ask farmers to do is look at the possibility of adopting a more traditional mixed farming approach. Maybe they currently do arable. Could they introduce some poultry, which isn't high in cost in terms of housing and fencing and so forth, compared to maybe some livestock, which may take a bit longer? And what we then do is encourage those farmers to rotate with certain animals and the certain crops and plants at certain times. So what you're doing is healing the soil as you go, which then they can start pulling back on chemical inputs. And also then it offers them far more routes to market, so that they then can break away from their supermarket contracts in the fullness of time and start working more directly with the public. But we are also bringing consumers and public into the picture, because what we need to do to ensure that can happen for farmers is look at the infrastructure at a local level. What processing have we got? What local abattoirs have we got? Maybe mobile feed mixers, mobile butchers. There's lots and lots of options we can look at. So farmers become far more self-sufficient, and they're supported by the community and consumers, who will then in turn be supplying. So we're working on that, and it's got to be a gradual process. I know the public want things to shift immediately, but we have to be realistic about how that can work, and allow time and energy and space and support and funding for farmers to start that transitionary process. But first off, we've got to highlight to farmers where the issues are, because some of them aren't actually aware yet.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And you don't know my background, Catherine, but I've lived in Mid Wales for many, many years, and especially over the foot and mouth outbreak. And when the European Union got involved, I'm one of the few people left with all my white hair that knows how farming existed before we joined the EU. And everybody that now thinks that because they've lost the single payment, etc., life is absolute hell. They don't realise what used to happen in the UK before we joined the EU, and our system was a lot better then than it is now. But it's the younger farmers, of course, have got absolutely no idea. When I lived in Brecon and Radnor, that's an area of my constituency with 3,500 square miles. There wasn't one abattoir. All had been closed under EU directives. And when you look at people, you look at hill farmers, there's not much else they can do except have a mixed sort of way of farming because of the hills. You can only put sheep and cattle up on the hills, etc. So when you look at that, the only way they can do anything is add value. Now you can't add value to anything unless where it's animals, they go to slaughter. If haven't got an abattoir, you're absolutely stuffed. They have to go miles. So I understand all the problems that you're talking about and that farmers have, because my father was a farmer, so I go back all these years. But it's absolutely fantastic. Now, when we were in Swindon, you talked about food hubs across the country. What sort of quantity of hubs are we talking about now?
So there's only a handful at the moment, because we only really launched this push in January. The Open Food Network have been going longer at the hubs than we have. So if you go on their site, you'll see there are scatterings of them. But what we really want to see, and again, just to explain a food hub to any listeners, it really is down to the community to decide what that looks like. So for some groups, it's going to be a space. It could be the back of a pub. For some of them, they've actually got backs of pubs that they're using, whereby they work with local suppliers and producers, and they receive or collect certain products on a certain day. They box them up to order, which can, again, all be done on the Open Food Network site. It's very simple. And then people come and collect those boxes. It could be a space where you bring together farmers and local community to discuss what they want to see happen in terms of what they want to buy from the farmer. How can the farmer meet the needs or start meeting the needs of their local community? Some people are using or want to use food hubs set up with an element where they supply for a food bank, for example. Some places will create workshops and learning and educational facilities for local people to be able to come and learn more from those that are more experienced in their local community, or potentially with their farmers. It could be a space where you bring farmers and growers together so they can start working together. The fodder industry is a hideous industry. Now, if farmers could come together and work amongst each other in terms of what they grow for fodder crops, and then we want to see those mobile food mixers coming in so they can get to the right levels of protein and whatever else is required for that particular animal. So there's lots of ways a food hub could be coming together. I mean, some of them are fantastic. They're tiny little things. They meet once a month. All the suppliers bring their stuff at the same time, and the consumers turn up and they buy it all at the same time. We're not here to dictate. We've had too many years of being a bit of a nanny state, being told exactly what to do. We are more than capable of doing it ourselves. We just need to take things up a gear idea and get started. And actually, by doing this, we're empowering people to realize just how involved they can be. And if you think about it, when you look at things like local processing, and it could be cheesemakers, butter, it could be anything. You start looking at that, you're going to also revitalize local economies that, let's face it, are utterly stagnated. We want to see high street butchers, pharmacists, high street butchers, fishmongers, greengrocers, the lot. Want to see that coming back. And those guys can then work more directly with the farms and the consumers. So there's so much you could create a food hub for. So whilst we have got a spattering across the UK, I want to see them in every village, town and community across the country. So people, you know, we're going to be doing our More Farmers, More Food campaign that we've launched recently, because we want to see more people growing, more people rearing, not less, more. And so we're sort of soft launch that. But in a few weeks' time, we'll be doing a big focus on dairy. A lot of people out there don't necessarily understand what conventional milking would look like, what the dairies are up against. And we're also going to be interviewing a farmer or two who has adopted a more raw milk, sell at the gate lifestyle, and how that's positively impacted them, but also benefited them financially, which I think is something that current conventional dairy farmers sometimes have concerns about, because that transition can be quite a scary one. But we're going to show how that's been done. And these farmers are incredible. They're ex-conventional dairy farmers themselves, so they figured it all out. And we'll help bring the solutions on that one. So what they want to do is then connect with local food hub groups, so they can then sell their wares, their raw milk and so forth through the food hubs. And then people can go off and start making their own cheese and their own butter and other stuff if that fits. But certainly you can have local processors, and all of it will stimulate local economies, which at the moment are absolutely struggling across the UK. Flat out. I don't think there's anyone who's particularly thriving at the moment. So there are so many multiple benefits, including our own physical health and well-being, and that of the animals involved in farming, if we can adopt these practices and these methodologies moving forward. So we're going to go to somewhere wonderful, but what we've got to do is all get involved now to support this transition and bring this to the fore.
I think that's absolutely marvelous, Catherine, because as I've said many a time on stage and on programs, we in the country are unlikely to starve, because the next door people have eggs, we have butter, or we make butter, etc., or we have vegetables, and somebody will bring in half a dozen eggs and go away with a bag of potatoes. There's always a rabbit knocking about, or a pheasant, or etc. So in the country, you don't starve. The people that are really going to suffer are the towns and cities, and you know, to get people there to understand what farming is all about, so that they understand. I think when we had Mark on stage in Swindon, you know, you look at the price of a cauliflower that the farmer gets, and look at the price of a cauliflower on the supermarket shelf. It's totally different. Also, it doesn't look the same either. So you have to wonder where a lot of this stuff comes from in the first place. I think it comes over in one of our lorries, and therefore it's branded British. And I suspect much of the stuff that is there isn't British at all. And so we've got to start looking. We've got to start looking inwardly to home. This little island would quite easily supplement the whole of the if you like, the raw food campaign. Vegetables, fruit, etc., apart from the tropical stuff, obviously. But it would do anything on here if only it was looked after properly. And
Yeah.
Putting chemicals into the land isn't. Whereas in the old days, even your own sewage, because of course people had outside loos in the old days, all that used to go back onto the land. You know, people weren't nearly as squeamish as they are now. But seriously, and you know, every bit of you know, sort of effluent, or anything from animals out of the cow shed, etc., all went back onto the land.
Yep. Yep. I mean, I still do it now with chickens waste and so forth. Not actually human waste, I must be honest, but certainly in terms of my animals that I've had over the years, I've always gone in the compost, or whichever bin I'm putting it in, and in the fullness of time, it then goes back on the land. We want to remove the need for artificial fertilizers and other such things, because the production of these things isn't really particularly good for the environment either around us. So allow animals to do what is natural. And you know, I've said to people, blackgrass, massive issue over in the southeast. And when I worked in agronomy, I'm not an agronomist, but I worked in the sector, and I followed these guys around a bit. And there's a number of different sprays you can put on there, but actually the best thing for blackgrass is cows. You stick a herd on there, they're going to clear that up, no problem at all. No chemical inputs required. Thank you very much. But the farmers over there have been led down this road of arable. Now, don't get me wrong, I do understand, obviously, like with Wales, there are certain terrains and climates that you can only do certain things. But certainly, I don't see any reason why the southeast farmers can't increase their livestock numbers and utilize those animals to support their crop growth. So the solutions actually aren't difficult in terms of the complexity of it. It's not complex at all. It's actually quite simple, but it is having the funding and the understanding and the comprehension by the agricultural industry as to what we need to do to fix the problems we have. And like I say, none of it's complex. Unfortunately, DEFRA don't want to play ball. Now, if I had my hands on DEFRA's budget, this would all be done within 12 months. We'd be on the road. It'd be happening because those farmers will need support with that transition in terms of cost. A lot of them don't have housing for certain animals and so forth. But again, it doesn't need to be massive sums of money in order to achieve this. Not when you think about what DEFRA blow every year. And achieve next to nothing to support farmers. But yes, if we had our hands on that DEFRA budget, Liz, it'd be sorted.
Can I just tell you, there's the other thing that we've not mentioned, and we better not hear because I could well be taken off air. We have such a thing as farmers' unions in this country. And if only the farmers' union, the NFU, which many farmers, I've stood up in many meetings and had to explain what the initials NFU stand for. In my father's day, they used to stand for National Farmers Union. The farmers don't actually use those initials for meaning that anymore. So we've got a new chairman of the NFU, which I'm hoping to get on this programme. So we'll see where that goes, Catherine. That could be quite an interesting conversation, I would think. But
straight after
seriously,
this call, Liz, I'm on a call with a bunch of farmers who want to tell me some things the NFU have been up to in a local area that they're not impressed by. I think some farmers are becoming a little more aware that a certain union aren't necessarily backing their corner. So it'll be interesting to see what they've got to say.
would you like to come back on air afterwards, please, and have a little chat with me? We'll have a little talk about it because I worked at the time of Foot and Mouth. And I can tell you now what I wouldn't have done with the NFU representatives in Mid Wales, I could be had up for. So it's together with the RSPCA, and that's another story. So, Catherine, I'm going to say thank you for coming on this morning. Go and talk to the farmers about the NFU. If anybody wants to talk to me about the NFU, they're very welcome to do so. I'd love to see the change. I'd love to see the change. Catherine, we're going to have you back on again. I know you're tight for time this morning. Thank you for explaining this. And let's get these hubs working across the country. Let's get farmers. Actually, if you talk to the young farmers organisations, I've always found them really receptive. They're not, many of them have grown up, unfortunately, under the EU and think that the subsidy that came from Europe is the answer to everything. It was the answer to nothing. And that's the whole problem. But they are receptive. Bless you for the work you've done. I can't say enough. And what I like about you is you're the same as me. I've got, these aren't age lines at all. I'm only 29, really. They're laughter lines. So we have a good time while we're doing it. And the farmers that I know locally, I'm going to get hold of now, and we'll start moving something. I'm down in East Kent, so right in the place where you're talking about. Thank you very much indeed. Go and sort the NFU out with local farmers. All right.
Smashing. Thank you so much.